Buckle in, my little creeps. Do I have the neighbor from hell story for you? So this story came from Chelsea and it involves her neighbor Agnes. And normally I like to use fake names for the other party, at least in these stories, because I can't usually verify that what the person sending the story is saying is true. However, in this case, there were arrests made, charges filed, convictions, and jail time served. And so we're going to use Agnes's real name because we're going to try to prevent her from doing this to other people, because this is just psychotic behavior. In 2020, Chelsea was looking for a new apartment and she has a pretty strict budget and she's looking in the Myrtle Beach area, and she comes across this unit that's part of an apartment complex with exterior entrance units. So all of the units are separate. There's no central hallway or entrance to all of the units, if you know what I'm talking about. And the apartment complex wasn't perfect, but it mostly checked all the boxes. It was in a good location. It had a pool and it was good enough. So she's like, you know what, I'm going to sign, I'm going to move in. She moves in and she's kind of disappointed because most of the people that lived in this complex were significantly older than her. She said it almost felt like a retirement home and she kind of felt out of place because she was in her late 20s, early 30s at the time. However, she was excited because the person who lived in the unit right next to her appeared to be around her age, like late 20s, early 30s. She said she would see her new neighbor coming and going. They would exchange pleasantries. And finally, she just introduced herself. She said she's a very friendly person and gets along with anyone. And her new neighbor introduces herself as Agnes. Over time, Chelsea and Agnes gradually became friends. Chelsea said she started to notice that Agnes had a similar work schedule to her, which she found unlikely because Chelsea got off work around 1 or 2 in the morning. So when she'd be off late, entering her unit around 1 or 2 in the morning, Agnes would be there entering her unit at the same time. And sometimes they would stand out in the hallway and they would talk because Chelsea says she's usually pretty wired after work and doesn't like to go right to bed anyway. It got warmer outside. Chelsea said she would have friends over to come to her apartment complex's pool and they would be hanging out and they would see Agnes come out and they would just invite Agnes to come and hang out with them. And sometimes Agnes wasn't invited, but she sort of just latched onto their friend group. But Chelsea said she genuinely did not mind. She did think that Agnes was a little bit strange, but was like, we're all weird, so it didn't bother me. She did say that she didn't really go out of her way to hang out with Agnes. It was just if Agnes was around, she was usually invited. But as I said, Chelsea got off work late at night, and because she didn't like to go to bed right away, sometimes she would have some people over, and she assumes that maybe the sound is what initially made Agnes angry and what made her hatch this plan. She doesn't really understand why Agnes ended up doing what she did, but if it was the sound that made her angry, she doesn't understand why she didn't just text her and tell her to calm it down. Like they had each other's phone numbers. When Chelsea began to be harassed by Agnes, she didn't know it was Agnes. Okay, so keep that in mind as we're going forward. But she said it started with strange messages, and she would get messages on various social media platforms from her friends and family members saying like, hey, were you hacked? Because I got this really weird message from you. Messages started off innocently enough, just inviting people over to her place, but the messages seemed to be coming from Chelsea's account on WhatsApp, which is basically a text messaging app. Was registered to her name, but she was like, I don't use this app. So she was like, that's weird. I don't know what's going on. It's not me. Don't come over. But then the messages got stranger. They were from random men that she knew, and they would send her screenshots and be like, hey, was this really you that sent this? And the messages were a little bit disturbing, and they would say, come over to my place. I'll be waiting for you. And they would go into graphic detail about what she was going to do to these men once they arrived at her place. She would respond to all these people and say, no, that's not me. Somebody has hacked me or is like impersonating me. Please report this to WhatsApp. But she said that she knew that whoever was doing it knew personal details about her, like the fact that she had 2 cats and she warned certain men of having allergies. So she had all these people reporting her impersonation account to WhatsApp, but nothing was really done. WhatsApp kind of gave her the runaround and wouldn't take down the account. Chelsea has her boyfriend over and he's like, are you hungry? And she's like, yeah, I'm hungry. He's like, okay, well, do you want me to order a pizza or do you want to stop and grab something when we go out? And she's like, I don't really know. So they don't decide anything, but she goes in the bathroom and she's finishing getting ready and there's a knock at the door. So she's like, oh, he must have ordered a pizza. So she goes to the door to answer and there's a random man that she recognizes from a local bar standing at her door. And she goes, can I help you? And her boyfriend walks up behind her and he's like, who's this guy? And the guy's like, who's this guy? Because you invited me over here so that we could do X, Y, and Z, very dirty things. And she goes, what are you talking about? Her boyfriend's like, Chelsea, what is this guy talking about? And there's this whole back and forth before eventually the guy pulls out his phone and shows her a string of messages that supposedly came from her, inviting him over to do X, Y, and Z. Now it's not just people that she knows in real life that this impersonator is messaging. It's random strangers from the town where she lives who are now coming over to her house. She explains the whole situation to the guy. Luckily, the guy doesn't put up a fight or something. He's like, I'm so sorry, and he leaves. But at this point, Chelsea's freaked out. Her boyfriend's freaked out. He's like, you need to call the police. So she does, and she reports it, and she gets assigned a detective. From this point forward, there were numerous times that strange men showed up to her door, were peeking in her windows, and on one occasion, a guy was even trying to break in which she had to call the cops again. When the police came, they caught the guy. The guy explains that they had been communicating online and that Chelsea had told him that she had a fantasy which involved him breaking into her house. He shows the police a string of messages in which Chelsea apparently gave consent, even though it wasn't Chelsea. So now things are getting really serious. These were obviously taking a huge mental toll on Chelsea. She said she lived alone and she was constantly terrified of someone breaking into her house, but she still didn't know who was behind this impersonation account, and she still didn't suspect Agnes. How busy and chaotic things had been, she really hadn't talked to her either, until one day she goes outside, she's tossing some trash in the dumpster, and she sees Agnes heading back into her unit, and she waves at her. But Agnes, instead of saying hi or greeting her the way that she normally does, averts her eyes and basically darts back into her apartment. This made Chelsea suspicious of Agnes because she also realized at this point that all of her other neighbors had been looking out, keeping an eye on her unit, but Agnes had never offered or been around anytime the police had been there. So at this point, she calls the detectives that she's been working with and she goes, "Hey, I have a suspicion that my neighbor Agnes is involved with what's going on." The detective ends up getting a warrant to search Alice's phone, and the next day they show up, they handcuff her, they arrest her. In her phone, they found hundreds of photos of Chelsea along with the messaging app that she was logged into as Chelsea, communicating with all of these people that had been contacting and harassing Chelsea for months. Go to court, Agnes pleads not guilty, and the judge sentenced her to trial. She ended up being found guilty of second-degree harassment and spent 11 weeks in jail. These were her other charges, and here's her mugshot. Chelsea says she does not believe that Agnes's punishment was enough because she tortured her for almost a year, but she wanted to share this to prevent Agnes from doing this to anyone else, because she was like, if she would do it to me, if she would spend almost a year impersonating me and trying to get these strange men to come over to my apartment and possibly harm me, I don't know what she's done to other people or what she's planning in the future. So beware. I'm putting together a compilation of crazy neighbor and neighbor from hell stories, so if you have one, feel free to submit it. We'd love to hear it.